Last week we talked about the Beatitudes and how they're worded, how they are statements of being and not cause and effect. This week Jesus says to the disciples in our gospel passage we read, "You are the salt of the earth." Now salt is something that is essential for human survival. Thanks to modern technology, salt is something that is easily accessible, and our problem is too much salt in our diet, not enough. But it was a commodity that was very valuable and also hard to acquire in Jesus' day. It was used as a preservative then as now. You know John's version of the feeding of the multitudes, where a boy comes up to him and presents Jesus with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And I imagine those 2 fish as being sort of salted, preserved fish that he's handing on to Jesus. Salt is something that is essential for life. And Jesus is saying to the disciples and to us modern disciples, you are the salt of the earth. You are essential for life. Earth in English can be interpreted in multiple ways. It can mean the population of the world, or it can mean the dirt, the physical earth. I believe that what Jesus is saying to us in this passage is something that includes the population, but also includes the physical environment. It is our responsibility as disciples of Jesus Christ to care for the physical environment. Some Christians have embraced this very freely in what has come to be known as creation care, and others shy away from it for reasons that I don't fully agree with. I think one of the key issues here is how do we interpret the 2nd chapter of Genesis, where human beings are placed in a garden and they are made to be gardeners, tenders of the world. God says to them, "This is your world." And some Christians interpret that in a more economic eyesight, saying if the world has been given to us freely as a gift, then it's ours to do with as we please. And if we want to trash it, we can. But I look at it in more of an organic sense. The earth is our home. It is our source of food. And if we trash it, then we run the risk of becoming like the salt that has lost its taste, being trampled underfoot. Now, there are a number of statistics and illustrations that I can use to talk about ways in which we as human beings have not properly respected creation. One illustration that I've mentioned to you before is that the amount of garbage that is found in the oceans now exceeds the amount that we find in landfills. 60 Minutes did a very good episode a while back where they went to an island in the Pacific that is now a refuge area where scientists can study the effects that pollution has had on the environment. And there are birds and fish that have shown up dead on the shores there. And they were taking them and opening them up and showing that their gullets and their stomachs were filled with plastic. And when the reporter asked the scientist, how many of these dead animals have plastic inside of them? The scientist said, every single one that shows up dead does. And when they eat that, it not only affects the natural ecosystem, the food chain, but it also gets into fish, and eventually that comes back to haunt us as well. It is to our own detriment when we do not see care of the natural world as an extension of our ministry. And I'd like for us at Northview to consider how this relates to us. What are we doing as consumers? What are we doing to take care of our environment and creation? How is that a part of our ministry? In our conference, we have Pat Watkins, who is a United Methodist elder. And he also was commissioned as the very first missionary to the natural world. He's the founder of an organization that is dedicated to creation care. There are churches in rural areas that have had a lot more land than we do. And they've taken plots of land and they've designated those to be gardens, which the neighborhood can benefit from. They've tilled the land, they've checked the soil to see what might grow well there, and then they've planted seeds and grown produce to share with other people in the area. Now you might imagine that if a church did that, some people might just come around at sundown and help themselves. But churches are proactive when they do this, about going to their neighbors and telling them what it is they're doing, and letting them know that once the produce comes up, they have a right to help themselves to it. Or if they want to bring seeds or have seeds that are provided and plant them themselves, they can also participate in this. That is a ministry that cares for the natural world, that cares for human beings by feeding those who are in need. And it's also a very inventive way to evangelize, to let neighbors know you have a physical connection to this sacred area where we gather. Today is Scout Sunday, and I myself don't have a lot of personal experience with Scouting. Much of what I've learned about it has been through the different ministries that I've been affiliated with throughout the years. One thing that I appreciate about the Scouts that I've learned is that Scouts are taught that you always leave an environment in better shape than when you found it. That's something that's taught whenever they camp and whenever they go to camps as well. At a United Methodist Conference Center where I once worked, we had 239 wooded acres in a suburban area. We had 3 miles of walking trails, and there were walking paths that went across ditches in the marsh level there that were designed and built by Eagle Scouts that were working on their projects there. We had scouts that stayed in our campground where we had 10 campsites free of charge, but they would do service projects in exchange for that. They helped us care for the land. And what the scouts would do would depend on the particular group. I asked a question of our maintenance director one time, what about very small children, because we weren't given anything for them to do. And it was suggested that we would ask them to bring bags and to sort of police the area for litter, and also pick up limbs that had fallen off of the trees. And I got some very different kinds of responses from scout leaders when I asked them to do this. One time we had a group of brownies who was going to be camping there overnight. And when I called the mother, who was the head of this particular brownie troop, I explained to her on the phone, now there's no charge for this, but we do ask for a service project in exchange for this. And the woman responded with panic immediately and said, oh, but these are brownies. These are little girls. I don't know that they can do much. And so I said, well, you just decide what your group can do. I then called another brownie leader who is bringing her troop out on a different weekend. And when I asked her to police the area for litter, I should mention this particular mother was a working mother. She was a lawyer, and so I had to call her at her office. And when I asked her to have the brownie troop police the area for litter, she paused for a beat and she said, is that all? Isn't there something more we can do to help you out there? So I love the fact that you had one mother that wanted to kind of coddle the children, and another one that would have been happy to have them out there chopping wood. But this is a part of who we are as Christians and how we care for the environment. This morning we heard a presentation about an Eagle Scout project that involves the planting of vegetation. 2 years ago, we heard a presentation from someone working on his project who put water fountains on the greenways here in the Roanoke area. And if memory serves me, is he the same scout that hiked the Appalachian Trail recently by himself? So these are some of the ways that we can partner with different organizations to care for creation. My challenge to you today is that throughout the year, prayerfully consider ways that Northview can include care of creation in our overall ministry. I know there are a number of you that like to go camping. There are certain times of the year when the weather gets warmer where I don't see you for certain stretches, and I miss you. I'd like to encourage you when you're camping with your family and your close friends to prayerfully consider how we at Northview could care for the outer environment. I was approached a couple of years ago with the possibility of having a group of us go camping together and having me go with you and to be sort of a devotional and worship leader on that weekend, while our lay speakers are here to conduct worship here. That's something we can explore. Or it could be something as simple as joining volunteers to walk the greenway trails and to pick up litter that's there, or supporting some of the other organizations in our area. For those of you who are on the outreach team, and for those of you who are involved with that committee, consider in 2021 how one of our first Sunday rail offerings can go to helping some creation care type cause. This is something that can be an environmental area, or it can be a combination. It's not like this is deeply divided. One of my favorite organizations, for instance, that the Youth Service Fund donated back when I was in high school is the Heifer International Project, that provides farm animals for people who are living in rural areas. This provides them a means to support themselves and their family, but it's also not just like giving money to someone so that they have enough supplies for that day. It gives them the pride of being able to work and to earn a living and to support themselves and their families. Or you may want to consider supporting an organization that supplies service animals for veterans who suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, because you've been working with me, that I don't often give you specific instructions. Normally I give you ideas like this, and I want you to consider what the Holy Spirit is saying to you. How can we as a church be involved in the ministry of caring for all of creations? Not to think of the earth as disposable, as something that's destroyed and trod underfoot, but as caring for this world that's been put into our hands. We are the salt of the earth. It is our mission and our ministry to care for God's creation and to present that to the next generation. Amen. Our affirmation of faith